So we're in the middle of a king tide right now. You asked a tide question the other day, right? About a month ago?
Could have been.
Could have been. Anyway, what I remember we talked about the bulge and the double bulge, right? Okay, anyway, this is what the tide is right now. This morning at 7:25 was 6.8 feet. Tomorrow it's a 6.96 feet, at almost 7 feet. And this is about the highest, and it goes down to a negative 1.5. So it's about 8.5 feet vertical. So that means that water level changes in 1 6-hour period, 8 feet. That's pretty amazing.
Well, what's it measured from and measured to?
Between, it's relative to some reference, mean high tide.
Yeah, but I mean, the tide goes out, and there's some places it's only that high. There's, if you go back into the ocean, it's real deep. So that's
you ask hard questions, man.
It's a vertical measurement, but
yes.
When do they make the measurement?
They have some reference. It's just like
Dave, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. What's the reference level of any tide? It's just some, I don't know its answer. Anyway, so the point is, these are the king tides, and if you look at the highest tides, you can see they come down. These are what we call the neap tides. These are the king tides with the greatest tidal range. Now, the interesting thing is there's only one king tide. The secondary tide is a much smaller tide. See that? So there's a giant, there's a giant, okay, there's a small tide, then a giant high tide, then a smaller high tide, then a giant high tide, and a smaller tide. Isn't that interesting? So remember we were talking about the bulge? The bulge is bigger on one side than the other. So when the earth spins around, you have an enormous high tide on one side, and on the other side, the bulge isn't as big, so you get a smaller high tide. And so I always think of this in terms of the sun and the moon setting or rising. So if the sun is setting while the moon is rising, or if they have to be parallel, that's when you get these enormous high tides. Okay, if the sun's going down and the moon's up here, it sort of cancels out and you get these smaller high tides. All right, so that's a little brief.
I think the reference is mean sea level. That's
yeah. So what does mean sea level though? It's just some reference.
Well, that's well established. Yeah, it's well established all around. It is variable at different places too. So it's your local mean sea level.
Yeah, so at some reference level. All right. Quit asking hard questions then. All right. So I'm going to start off by reviewing a bit from last time. So we started off last time talking a little bit about a thought experiment where we said that 5,000 years ago, if you're in Iran and you were hiking in the Zagros Mountains and you saw this rock here that has shell fossils in it, and you went back and you asked your dad who was hiking with you, what's going on? And he said, he didn't know. Why would there be shells at the top of a mountain? And you'd go back to talk to the village elders. And this is probably how the flood myths arose. And as I said, many cultures have a flood myth. So that was one thing we talked about. Then we talked about real floods that we think exist that are enormous in scale. This is the glacial Lake Missoula that we talked about, in which there was an ice dam, something like thousands of feet high. And this flood caused this valley to be cut hundreds of feet deep. And this is an artist's rendition of the popping of this dam that blocked the lake and the flooding of the waters into western Washington. We also talked about fossils, the importance of fossils, and how fossils may have been instrumental in defining some of the myths that we've learned about when we were kids. So this type of fossil here might have been a source for the idea of the griffins. So we talked a little bit about how fossils, the occurrence of fossil life has influenced our mythology. We also talked a little bit about Darwin and the theory of evolution. I won't read those words, but we'll talk about it in a while. Then we talked about the geologic record, how we have a history. Geologists like myself study the geologic history that started around 4.6 billion years ago and goes all the way up to what's happening today. And this sort of cartoon thing tells you some of the events that have happened and has a time scale here. These are millions of years ago, so 252 million years ago, 2.5 billion and so forth. And then we have different names, Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian. These are all based on originally on which types of fossils occurred in those different strata. So you could go anywhere in the world and you'd know you're in the Cambrian based on the fossils that you found in those rocks. And that's how those are named. And then later, when we could actually date the rocks radiometrically, we started assigning these firm numbers to them. So everywhere you go in the world, the Cambrian is going to be between those age ranges. And we talked a little bit about how all the different fossils that occur in rocks were studied by geologists using millions and millions of person hours, studying all around the world, trying to understand which rocks contained which fossils, and then eventually dating those rocks. And we came up with a geologic history of the planet Earth basically from the Cambrian on, when we started getting fossils that have hard parts. There was life prior to the Cambrian, but the animals back then really didn't have hard parts, so we don't really know much about what their history was. So we have this very detailed history of life on the planet from about the Cambrian on, when based on study of animals with hard parts. Obviously, there's a lot of animals that don't have hard parts, and they've evolved, and we don't know anything about them because they're not preserved. We only see like those little shells of trilobites and clam shells and fish. And if they didn't exist, we wouldn't know anything about the evolution of life. So our view of the evolution of life on the planet is really biased by what's preserved. So if something's preserved, we can study it. If it's not preserved and it just rots away like a mushroom or something like that, we have no idea how it's evolved over time, or very little. There's some cases you might preserve things like that, but much less probability. Yep.
Could you tell us something about the extinctions?
We're going to talk, that's the whole purpose of this lecture. That's all we're going to talk about. So I'm building up excitement. So we're going to talk about extinctions. So gigantic extinction, big extinction. That's what we're going to talk about today. The whole talk is on that. No. There we go. We also talked a little bit about the origin of life on our planet. And and I talked to you about these weird rocks. These are meteorite fragments or chondrites that have organic carbon in them. And they've dated these carbonaceous chondrites as being about as old as the Earth, yet they have organic remains in them. And so the organic remains aren't life forms, but they're chemicals that occur in living things like amino acids and peptides and things, benzene and so on and so forth. So the question is, are these some sort of cosmic seeds that came onto our planet that actually caused life to evolve? Or can you make this stuff inorganically? Today, the way you make all these carbon things is through life processes. But so we also talked a little bit about how you might be able to make organic things, which normally means life forms, inorganically. And we talked about these experiments that were done in the 50s and since then about how they've been able to create proto-life forms without actually, I mean, they made amino acids and other things that are building blocks for life forms inorganically. So this is just sort of an interesting thing. We have these pieces of meteors or meteorites, carbonaceous chondrites, and you can buy these on eBay, that have organic, what we would normally consider to be organic or having to do with life forms in them, only they're the age of the Earth, which is just it's a really interesting scientific problem. All right, and then we talked about I'm convinced there's probably been life on Mars. All right, and we talked about these algal stromatolites or bacterial mats, cyanobacterial mats, very, very, very primitive life forms that occur on our planet here in weird places like hypersaline lagoons and so forth. And this is what they see on one of the rovers on Mars. And this thing looks to me, if you just gave me a picture of this and said, what is this? I say, well, that's an algal stromatolite, very similar to what these are. And these things occur on Earth back about, 2 to 3 billion years ago. And we think we see these former life forms, now they're fossils, on Mars. Now, this doesn't say whether there's any life forms on Mars today, but it just suggests that there was life on Mars in the past. So that's pretty dramatic to me. This is from a paper from about a year ago. So brand new science. Isn't that exciting? Yeah, all right. Okay. Yeah.
So we got these rovers wandering around there.
Yeah.
And would they actually get samples of this? How would they prove that that was indeed?
Well, the funny thing, okay, the question is how do you prove that this thing is actually a fossil and not just some sort of chemical precipitate or something? Well, the funny thing is there's guys today, if you saw this in northern Michigan, where we see things like that, they'll say, oh, that's not organic. So there's always scientists that are doubters anyway. So basically, you'd look at the textures of it. There's all these very intricate, if this is what we call a cryptalgal or a cyanobacterial mat, they have sort of this crinkly texture. You could probably do some chemical studies that might help. Chances are you're not going to get 100% of the way to prove that this was really a fossil life form, and it not some sort of blister effect of, I don't know what would cause it. So I'm pretty convinced that this was a life form. It would be how would you prove it is a really interesting question that I don't really have an answer right off the top of my head. But you could probably get Caltech to come here and talk about this. That they're the big guys in this sort of analysis. Okay, we also talked a little bit about this diagram, which is a beautiful diagram showing the evolution of the trilobites. Remember, so the first trilobite was found about 524 million years ago. That's about the oldest trilobite, and there's only one type of trilobite. And then this is its family tree, and it branched into all these different types of trilobites over time. Okay, so this is a map, a tree showing the evolution of trilobites, those little weird creatures that are about this big to this big that probably scurried along in the shallow seas. Remember, you all remember that, right? Okay, so this is the evolutionary diagram of the trilobites. And that point right at the top is when the last trilobite existed and has never been seen again. So that was the final extinction. But you can see that whole bunch of trilobites died out right here. See that? So look, all these trilobites died out there. Those are extinction events that we'll talk about today. All right. Okay, so, and this is from Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, Devonian from about 524 to about 251 at the top. And our little cartoon diagram, here's that same time period shown, just tying you back to that cartoon that we looked at. Millions of years, yeah. Yep. Is it a hard one? I don't like the hard questions. All right.
Is there any suggestion that trilobite is one of our
Hold on.
ancestors?
Hold on.
I can do it, Gary. Is there any question that, is there any possibility that trilobites evolved into something that we might know today?
Yeah, like us. And if so, what, when that became extinct, does that mean there was no more evolution from that point?
As far as I know, this isn't my specialty, but as far as I know, trilobites were gone, never to be seen again. They kind of look like horseshoe crabs, but apparently biologically they have no similarity.
So they just kind of evolved and became something and then died away, extinct.
And
that
gone
was it.
forever. Just like the dodo, right? No, seriously. I mean, the dodo is an example. We all know about the extinction of the dodo. Basically, that last trilobite there, that's the dodo, and it's gone, never to be heard from again.
So what makes it interesting?
We're going to find out. Geez,
That's
you
kind of the
guys.
definition of extinction, isn't it? You're going, right?
Extinction, what it is. Okay, here we go. In biology, extinction is a termination of a kind of organisms or a group of kinds, attacks and usually a species. The moment of extinction is generally considered to be the death of the last individual, like whichever was the last dodo, right, of the species, although the capacity to breed and recover may have been lost before the span. So obviously, if you had one male dodo that lived 50 years, you know, when he finally died, everything was extinct, but it was, since there's no female dodos, it was basically extinct before that. And so there's a little bit of softness about defining the exact time of when an extinction occurs. But this is a cool concept. The Lazarus taxis, where you think, okay, the dodo's extinct, and then they find a dodo and then you say, oh, it's come back from the dead, you know, just like Lazarus. How about this? More than 99% of all species, over 5 billion species that ever lived on Earth, are assumed to be extinct. Yeah. And we didn't do a lot of it, so that's a good thing.
Does species include anything that's ever been living, like microbes and all that? I mean, what species?
You ask hard questions. I don't know that. I presumably it's fungus and everything else, but I really don't know I stole that from someone else, so I haven't done the math to figure out what that includes. But we'll talk about that later. Here's some cartoons. We've worked out what the creature looked like. Now all we need to do is figure out why it became extinct. Huge ivory tusk, luxurious fur, tender flesh. Okay, a little humor. Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over every living thing that moves on earth. And then on second thought. Tom, is that you, you old rascal? I thought you were extinct. Lazarus, I expect. Okay. Not causing any mass extinction, the cosmic pies nevertheless formed a considerable nuisance for the dinosaurs. All right. All right, let's get serious. Evolution versus extinction. So again, we talked about this. This is showing us both the evolution of the trilobite, but also extinction events. Yes. Peggy Sue. No. Carrie Sue, it's close. Pill bugs, yeah. So the question is are trilobites related to pill bugs, roly-polies? They might both be arthropods, but I don't know. No, look up horseshoe crabs. Horseshoe crabs really look like it, and I know they're not related. Yeah. Sorry. Okay, so an extinction event, also known as a mass extinction or biotic crisis, is a widespread and rapid decrease in the biodiversity. It's identified by a sharp change in diversity and abundance of the multicellular organisms, a lot of words there. Estimates of the number of mass extinctions over the last 540 million years range from as few as 5 to more than 20. These differences stem from the threshold for defining the extinction event. Because most of the diversity and biomass on Earth is microbial, and thus difficult to measure, recorded extinction events affect the easily observed. This is an important thing. It's the biologically complex components. So the things that we can see in rocks, things that have fossils, we can study extinction events, but obviously microbes, fungus, anything that's soft and doesn't get preserved, we don't know very much at all about. Sometimes we know a little bit from weird rocks that preserve that sort of stuff, but in general, very little's known. So we're mostly studying fossils here to come up with these answers. Yeah, again, and most of the rocks that we study are marine rocks because there's a reason for that. So most of our study of extinction is in marine organisms more than on land organisms. Because marine rocks are much more easily preserved. And there's a reason for that, but it's complex. It would take me 10 minutes to explain it. Okay, so here are the 5 extinction events. So this is number of genera, singular genus. And here you can see them increasing. By the way, why do you think they're increasing? Let's say this is 500 million years ago, and this is now. Why do you think there's more genera today than there was 500 million years ago. Okay, maybe it's due to evolution. It's actually due, I don't know, this is my interpretation. There's more rocks of this age preserved than, the rocks that are 500 million years old have been eroded and destroyed. So I'm pretty sure this is actually just a preservation history. But what's really key here is they're looking at these bumps. When you see a drop like that, that's an extinction event. And they think that they've identified 5 major extinction events: the late Cretaceous, late Triassic, late Permian, late Devonian, and late Ordovician. And that's what we're going to talk about today. That's the only thing we're going to talk about today. Plus, because you've been good, I'll talk about a 6th extinction event, just as sort of a treat. All right. All right. So again, we can now look at this evolution of the trilobites, and we can start saying, well, where are these extinction events on this diagram? So I did that. So here's our little diagram in the upper left. So this is the Ordovician, late Ordovician. That's that first one. There's the Devonian, late Devonian. And then that's the Permian at the top, at the very last red line. So here's 3 extinction events. And here is this diagram I just pulled off the internet. And you can see that the end of these trilobite families end at these different extinction events. And this is some of the data that went into making that diagram. So diagrams like this, only much more detailed. I'm going to show you what a real diagram looks like. This is very, very simplified. But you can see that that information is how they came up with that diagram. All right. And here's brachiopods, which are those little weird, look like clams, but they're a different animal. And I tried to, here's those different extinction events. You can see that in the, this one here, this is the Permo-Triassic one. This is the largest extinction that's ever happened right here. And you can see some of these guys end at that point. Some of these don't seem to match very well. Here, maybe this one is matching with, no, maybe not. Maybe that one matches with that one, and so on and so forth. So I just pulled this figure off the web, and then I applied these red lines at those extinction events. So that's what they've done to create that diagram, is they've gone through all the fossils that they have, and they said, when did I stop seeing this type of brachiopod? And if it's about here, that would be like, oh, we'll put that onto that diagram. Okay, so that's how they came up with the extinction event plot. So here's a fancier diagram. This is geologic time back 542 million years. And the reason they stopped here is why? Why don't they have it back to 600 or 700 million years? What's that? Well, yeah, or another way to say it, none of the animals had hard parts back then. So we can't really study them easily. Okay, so this is geologic time here, and this is basically the size of the extinction event. So the higher up the blue line goes, the bigger the extinction event. So you can see that the biggest extinction event was when? End of the Permian. So see how high that is? But then look, it's actually got like a couple of things in there. So some of these things have doublets. So they're not just one spike. Sometimes there's whole clusters of spikes. Okay, so this is a plot showing these different extinction events. Here's our 5 guys, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's corresponding to this. So that's the same graph up on top. And I've just drawn the dotted red line showing that these are, they're matching pictures. And again, we all noted that the Permo-Triassic extinction was the big daddy. There's a whole bunch of extinction events. They're calling, the experts have said there's 5 big ones that they think are significant. I don't know why these guys are so high yet are discounted. They're calling everything else minor extinction events. So we'd have to, your point is valid, and if I'd known you'd ask that, I would have figured it out beforehand, but I didn't, so I apologize.
What causes each of those?
That's the whole purpose of the class. All right. And it's exciting. You're going to be excited. All right. So the late Devonian doesn't look like much. Here's the late Devonian. Looks, that's compared to this guy. And here's our famous one. This is the one where all the dinosaurs died. So that's pretty exciting. So, but it's not high. Look at how much higher this. Yeah, everybody's heard about the death of the dinosaurs, but look at how much more died at the Permo-Triassic.
Well, that, those are numbers that have died. Is that right?
Yes,
Numbers of
genuses or
organisms that have died.
yes. Basically, on those little life trees of fossils, is whenever you have an extinction of that thing, they count it as okay. And then when you have something like this, a whole bunch of things extinguish at that same event. So there are a bunch of dodos at that point that don't exist ever again after that point. So after this point, whatever caused this spike, those animals or plants or whatever don't exist anymore, ever. And that's how we come up with that 99%. This is showing a whole bunch of extinction in our history. Okay, and here's back to our trilobite diagram. This is just different representations of the same data. And I just wanted to show you, everybody's always trying to mess with the data. So this is showing little bar diagrams associated with the 5 major extinctions. Here they show this sort of pinching thing saying, oh, there's evolution. No, there's extinction. Oh, there's evolution, extinction, that sort of thing. All the numbers are slightly different. So they'll say, oh, it's 90%. No, it's 50%. So I don't know enough about the details to know why the numbers are different. So here, yeah, down here, Permian, 60% of animal families, including many marine species, insects, amphibians, are wiped out during that extinction. 35% in the Triassic, 50% in the Cretaceous, and so on and so forth. Here's what data really look like. We are now at the Cretaceous tertiary boundary. This is when the dinosaurs died. This is the last big one. And these are all the fossils that they're describing in this study. It's not even a global study. This is just one local area that they're studying. This is how many different fossils they're using to create those diagrams. And you can see all the terminations of the fossils. Now, if you have something right here, is this associated with that event? Well, it may have been that the water temperature changed or something. And these fossils were living somewhere else. They just moved laterally, So sometimes this will give you a different answer than you might expect. So this guy here may have been killed off here, but the reason you don't see any of the fossils in the rocks in this period is because the depositional environment of the rocks may have been wrong to preserve those fossils. So this looks like all you do is go, oh, here, this is the extinction event. It's really easy to find, but there's always subtleties in terms of the interpretation. Does that make sense? All right.
It's like science is complicated.
And it's going to get complicateder. And I'm going to prove it to you. And you're going to, oh, this is complicated. But you will also see wonderful, you'll see a lot of beauty in this as well. I promise. This is really cool stuff. All right, what causes extinction? I created this slide for you. All right. As you will learn, there's plenty of discussion and argument about what causes extinction. I've been to geologic meetings where they've almost had fist fights over, you said this, and I'm serious. And certainly using bad words. Okay, so we've learned a lot, and here we go. Okay, we're going to talk about death to dinosaurs. Now, these are, again, all those different 5 events, and we're going to be talking about this one here, this extinction event right there. And this is just a reminder, this is one of the diagrams we showed, showing the first invertebrate back here, and the first fish 480 million years ago, and the first land plants 440 million years. But here we're saying end of dinosaurs around 65 million years ago. That's the only end there. Everything else is first, and they put in the end of dinosaurs.
Question.
Yep.
You shared with us a little while ago a huge number of organisms that have died, that have been extinct since the beginning of time.
Yep.
My question is there any organism that has survived from the beginning of time to today?
Yeah, algal mats. Remember those cryptalgal mats in the lagoons? Those are around 3.5 billion years ago. The cyanobacterial mats. The scum in your bathtub should now have a lot more, you should have more respect for it.
So there's hope for human beings.
No, I'm not sure about that, but that algal, basically the cryptalgal mats are kind of like the cockroaches of the fossil record. Okay, that's our Cretaceous. That's the big guy right here. Here I'm just putting 100 million year marks, so different red lines. Okay, this is a good story. You ready? Okay, so just the whole concept of extinction changed dramatically in 1980, as I'll tell you in a few minutes. But before then, everybody knew things were getting extinguished over time. So any paleontologist, they would always wonder, why did this organism stop 300 million years ago? And so, for example, dinosaurs being so glorious, there was a lot of discussion about what killed the dinosaurs before we got really scientific and technical about it. And here's some of the crazier ideas. Hay fever killed the dinosaurs. And you're laughing. Well, it turns out that flowers evolved about the same time as dinosaurs evolved. So this is an example of causation and correlation does not imply causation. So this is an example. Another one is dinosaurs got so darn big they crushed themselves. Okay. Mammals outcompeted the dinosaurs. I'm sure you've heard that one. Mammals ate all the dinosaur eggs. All right. Cosmic rays killed the dinosaurs, getting a little bit more wild out there. And then dinosaurs just faded away into extinction. So these are some of the theories. The problem with a lot of these things is you can disprove these theories just like that. I can disprove these theories that fast, because all you have to point out is it wasn't just the dinosaurs, it was like 50% of all life on the planet. So how would mammals eating dinosaur eggs cause, tabulate corals to go extinct or something like that? So a lot of these things may apply in the guy's mind who wrote the paper, but aren't very well thought out.
Left out the famous Far Side cartoon of a picture of dinosaurs.
I know that actually you weren't here in the first lecture, and that was my first slide.
Oh, okay.
Wasn't it, right? Don't make me go look at that slide. I'd have to go back. Okay, no, that is the most famous Far Side cartoon by far. Okay, I want to tell you a little story now about craziness in science. So as you all know, I was a failed professor at Stanford, and we'd have all these, because it was Stanford, we'd have all these people who wanted to come and I gave a lecture at Stanford. So this really famous scientist came to Stanford, and he said, he came up to us, he just like grabbed us and he said, I'm seeing doubles. Whenever I look at these rocks, this type of rock, which is a shale, a mudstone, he said, I see doubles. I see the double layers, the couplets, see these couplets? I'm seeing doubles everywhere. And he goes, why are the layers always in doubles? I swear this guy was serious and he was concerned and he thought he had a big one. So why would you have double layers in these rocks? They're recording seasonal variations. Were we having double seasons? How do you get double seasons, class? Why would you have twice as many seasons as we have now? You ready? Sitting on the edge of your seat, put your safety belts on this. Okay, here we go. He proposed that there were rings around the earth, and that's why you had these double seasons. He was serious. I mean, and then you ask the question, well, what happened to the rings? And he's like, oh. So he concluded in the past, so to get these couplet beds, this is a real story, Gary. This is a famous guy. He said the Earth had rings just like Saturn. And I swear he had no other evidence to support this, just this observation of the couplets. So at the same time, we heard this guy, I was at Stanford, and this guy from across the bay came over and he gave a presentation at Stanford, and his name was Walter Alvarez. This is about us studying one thing leads to an accidental discovery of another thing that was one of the greatest scientific discoveries of the decade, maybe the century. Okay, so shortly after the rings around the Earth presentation, this guy from UC Berkeley came and said that there was some mud layers that indicated that an asteroid had killed the dinosaurs. And we were just like, this guy's insane, right? You know, like, how can you say this? So that's Walter Alvarez and Louis, his father, and that's the actual layer. So all the rocks down here are Cretaceous in age. This is killing the dinosaurs. So this is Cretaceous. Then you have this layer here, and all the rocks here are younger than the dinosaurs. So no dinosaurs here, dinosaurs here. They all disappear right there. Team Alvarez, UC Berkeley, 1980. Walter Alvarez was studying sedimentation rates across the Cretaceous tertiary boundary. So Walter Alvarez knew the dinosaurs had died out, and his dad was Nobel laureate. And his dad came up with this idea, and he said, iridium is this weird element that really doesn't occur on Earth, but only occurs in cosmic particles. So if you measure the rate of iridium falling into mud layers, it'll tell you how fast the muds were accumulating, because the iridium's coming in as a constant rain, very like billionth, very, very small volumes of it that he could measure. So the idea was that they were trying to measure how fast the muds were accumulating over time. Seemed like a simple idea. So his dad, Lewis, a Nobel Prize winning physicist, proposed that by studying the amounts of iridium in the mud layers, they could, which is an extraterrestrial component, they could get an idea about how fast the muds were depositing over time. All right. When they measured the iridium content, this is what they found. So they're going up a cliff face and they're seeing this is the variation in iridium, parts per billion, 0.1 parts per billion. This is like just about nothing. And they're going up and they're saying, oh yeah, this is it. You know, this is the background iridium. And then bang, there's where the dinosaurs died out, and look what the iridium level does. It spikes. Okay, and they spent, you know, a long time figuring what would cause this spike in iridium. And that's when they finally said the only thing we can think of is an asteroid hit the Earth and killed the dinosaurs and a whole bunch of other animals too. This would explain not just the death of the dinosaurs, but just about everything, right? So that's Walter and his dad. I've met him a number of times. That's the actual layer right there. Another pictures. This is in Gubbio, Italy, as I recall. Oh, now I have to do the other versions of it. Here's some dinosaurs going, whoa. And then admittedly, this find does bolster the extinction by meteor theory. Bunch of dinosaurs pointing towards the sky. And then Make-A-Wish. Okay, that's sort of a silly one. Okay, the smoking gun problem. So Walter and his dad say, okay, I think a asteroid hit the Earth, some bolide hit the Earth and killed the dinosaurs. But the problem is because of what we call plate subduction, the crater might have landed out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean somewhere and then been subducted, and we'd never be able to prove it. Right? So because oceanic crust gets pushed underneath continental crust at a relatively rapid rate, about as fast as your fingernails grow, maybe where the asteroid hit has gone and we'll never be able to prove it. So here's the math. If the subduction is occurring at 5 centimeters per year, every subduction zone must have consumed 3,000 linear miles. Hawaii is 25. Basically, since the death of the dinosaurs, we've removed amount of crust from here to Hawaii, a lot of crust. All right, so they're thinking, well, maybe if it landed somewhere, it doesn't exist anymore. So here's the question that they're left with. They got this iridium spike, which is some element that nobody's ever heard of before, right? Unless you're a chemist. What's the likelihood that we find evidence of the crater, and will the crater ever be found? So now what? Walter Alvarez and his dad proposed this outrageous theory, right? Now what do we do? Just consider it as some weird theory and go on with things? What do you do for the next step? What would you guys do? He proposed this outrageous theory that all the dinosaurs were killed by a gigantic rock hitting the planet. How would you prove that?
I'd go ask you.
That'd be a good idea. How would you do that? And that's what actually happened. Any other thoughts? One of the earliest things that this guy did, which was just absolutely brilliant and simple, was the following. I met this guy. This is Bruce Bohor. A guy started studying that, so we have the Cretaceous rocks here, which had the dinosaurs, and the rocks above, no dinosaurs, and there's this one little layer that shows the transition. He studied that transition, and one of the things he found in it were quartz grains. We all know the mineral quartz, but this is what a normal grain of sand looks like, quartz grain of sand. This is what's called a shocked quartz grain, which means it's been smashed by something. And they found accumulations of shocked quartz crystals right at the boundary. And so everybody said, wow, that might mean something like a bolide hit the earth. It supported the Alvarez hypothesis. Then I had lost my job at Stanford and I moved to the University of Puerto Rico. And this guy, Hildebrand, who's now in Canada, said, I've almost found the smoking gun. It's in Haiti, the country of Haiti, off the Dominican Republic. And what they found is, as I'll show you, is this one layer is about 4 inches thick. And there's chalk below, and the chalk is the same age of the dinosaurs, and the chalk above has no dinosaur equivalent. And there's this weird layer 4 inches thick, about this thick, and it's got glass beads in it, glass beads, and shocked quartz crystals, and chunks of weird iron, which I thought originally might be from the alien spacecraft, but I was told were actually part of the meteor. So in 1990, Hildebrand noted that an ejecta layer had been found in Haiti. The ejecta layer included glass beads or microtectites, and we have to be really close. And the quartz grains were a lot bigger than the ones they'd seen elsewhere. So here's the actual reference to the paper. Cretaceous Tertiary. Cretaceous is when there's dinosaurs. Tertiary is above the dinosaurs. And to make things worse, for some reason, a bunch of scientists don't like the word tertiary anymore. And now they're calling the KP boundary for the Paleogene. It's like they changed the word, and I love tertiary, but I can't say it anymore. So some of these have the tertiary. You're not supposed to say it anymore. It's like a bad word. Anyway, here's that core. Here's actually Balak, Haiti. I've been there twice. And here's that layer. I can't read the scale there. So that's all those weird glass beads, and this is below, and there's iridium in the layer as well. And here's a close-up of those glass beads. All right, so it's getting more exciting. In 1978, geophysicist Glenn Penfield and blah, blah, blah were working for the Mexican State Oil Company as part of a survey of the Gulf of Mexico, and they found this circular object on the Yucatan Peninsula. And blah, blah, blah. They defined it using any means they could. They, added some more data, and they're expanding their studies. So what happened was in 1990, a guy at the Houston Chronicle told Hildebrand, the guy was doing the stuff from Haiti, about Penfield's early discovery of a possible impact crater. So Hildebrand, the guy who was talking about the Haiti, microtectites, said, oh gosh, this would fit perfectly if the bolide hit in the Yucatan Peninsula. So Hildebrand contacted Penfield, and the pair, they started looking at wells that oil wells that had been drilled in that crater area. And they studied them, and they showed the shock metamorphic, the deformed quartz crystals. And then later in 1996, they drilled those structures, and they've defined this thing called the Chicxulub crater, and I can't ever pronounce it, so I'm going to go here.
This is your living room / yoga shanti / regional office /
Okay, here's how you pronounce it.
Chicxulub crater.
Chicxulub crater. Say it again.
Chicxulub crater.
All right, so that's how you pronounce it. I always forget how to pronounce it. Chicxulub crater. All right. Okay, and there's been a whole bunch of, now that we have an example of where this bolide might have impacted, there's a whole bunch of older wells that were drilled in that area, and new ones by the National Science Foundation, trying to understand what actually happened. And these are core samples from right in the impact zone. And there's a type of rock type that I'd never heard of before called swavite. And that's basically this melted, crushed rock from the impact. So they're showing that at the end of the Cretaceous, there was a bolide. It smack dab hit the Yucatan at that time period. They've dated the rocks. And in Haiti, which is, a few hundred miles away, we see all this event of the weird micro glass beads and the chunks of metal and so on and so forth. Here's where they, again, this is called the KT boundary. It's supposed to be called the KP boundary now. But anyway, this is where it's been studied. So it was originally studied by Alvarez in Italy and in Denmark. And then the purple areas tell you you're really close to the impact area. And the way they're telling how close you are to the impact area is really based on like what's there and how big the grains of sand are. So if you have big old pieces of shock quartz, you'd imagine you're closer than if you had little tiny pieces of shock quartz, for example. And if you have the little spherules like you see on the microtectites like you see in Haiti, that's an indicator that you're probably closer than further away. So anyway, they made this map here showing all these different places where they've studied this, what they're calling here the KT event, the extinction event. All right. And here's just showing how the nature of the impact deposit changes. If you're really close, you see all sorts of debris because you can imagine it set up a gigantic wave, and the wave pushed around the sediments and ripped up the sediments. So you have this giant, you have what are called mass flows, like debris flows and so forth, associated with proximity to this giant wave that formed. And then all this debris, and they have all sorts of things down. Breccia, which is just broken up rock, sandstone, marl clay, and limestone are the rocks that precede it and go after the event. And these little, here's those little spherules like we see in the microtectites. And so, for example, different areas. So what they're doing is they're showing how the nature of that Cretaceous tertiary boundary event changes from where you are in Mexico, very close to Mexico, all the way over to Spain, where you're thousands and thousands of miles away. So this is all the characteristic of that one event that's representing basically a few days, a day, a week, something like that. That whole event is just a fraction of time.
Was the impact,
yep.
was the impact, I'm sorry, I'm coming from the speakers. I'm on Zoom. Was the
yep.
impact event at the time above the water level?
Well, let's talk about that, shall we? It's in the water, and we'll look at that in a video in about 1 minute. Okay, this is showing how big the shock quartz grains are. So you can imagine nearer the event, you'd see bigger grains. Farther away, you'd see smaller grains. let's see what else. Shock quartz grains, paleo distance, number per centimeter. There's something else here. Yeah, good enough. Anyway, so these are all characterizing this same boundary event across the world. Okay, so to sum up, paleontologists have long recognized the global scale and abruptness of the major biotic turnover in the Cretaceous Paleogene about 65.5 million years ago. So again, it's not just the dinosaurs dying out, plants were dying out, algae, marine fossils, lots of different creatures were dying out at this time. This boundary represents one of the most devastating events in the history of life and abruptly ended the age of dinosaurs. 40 years ago, that's the Alvarez time, the discovery of anomalously high abundance of iridium and other platinum group elements. Those are the chunks of metal that I was saying came from alien spaceships, but I'm just kidding. And the boundary clay led to the hypothesis that an asteroid about 10 kilometers in diameter collided with the Earth and rendered many environments uninhabitable.
Regarding the extinction of the dinosaurs, did they die the next day, or were they still around for 100 years and then?
Presumably dead that. We're going to talk about that in a minute, but probably killed them right away.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh yeah, this is nasty. We're going to look at that. Yep.
Is there a crater visible from where the asteroid hit?
No, that was the thing in the Yucatan. Remember the picture we looked at a minute ago? The little, it's about 100 miles in diameter. And it was a block of rock about 10 kilometers wide, hit and made a hole about 100 kilometers wide. And that's the asteroid. But we'll take a look at it in a minute in a video. The occurrence of an impact is substantiated by the recognition of impact ejecta, including those spherules like we saw in Haiti, shocked minerals, the quartz crystals, and nickel-rich spinels, chunks of the spaceship, in many of the boundary event deposits. The ejecta distribution points to an impact in the Gulf of Mexico Caribbean region. This prediction is reinforced by the discovery of the, it's 200 kilometer diameter, Chicxulub, I can't see, structure on the Yucatan Peninsula. Modeling suggested the size of the crater and the release of climatically sensitive gases from the rocks beneath could have caused catastrophic environmental effects such as extended darkness, global cooling, and acid rain, and also fires. Some people argue that there's other interpretations. Some people have argued that the timing isn't, the dinosaurs died out at a different time as the crater. Again, these are scientists arguing amongst themselves. And additionally, approximately 1 million year long in place. Oh, there's also some volcanism that occurs at the same time. So people were saying, no, it was the volcanoes that killed the dinosaurs. So there's always somebody who's going to argue with you about your interpretation. I am fully behind the Alvarez hypothesis, but again, there are some quite famous people that I'll show you pictures of that are against it. Now, recently, this is from 2019, a couple of years ago. There is a study in North Dakota that's pretty interesting of rocks right at the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary. And what they are, it represents a river that occurred in North Dakota 65 million years ago. And what they noted in the river is the flow in the river based on study of the rock features. The flow reverses. So they think the wave came up the river and then flowed back the other direction twice. There's an iridium spike there. See the iridium spike up there? I can't get to it. There's spherules like the microtectites in it. Here's some of the fossils that occur. They see evidence of, things they think are associated with the impact, things falling into the mud layers. This shows remember the little glass beads, the microtectites? This is comparing the chemistry of the microtectites in North Dakota with those in Haiti. And you can see they're the same composition. This is, ytterbium, I don't even know what these are, hafnium, zirconium, neodymium, samarium, and so on and so forth, lead, lawrencium. So anyway, you can see all these elements basically overlie. So they think this is the same stuff deposited at the same time. So those are some of the glass beads at the top. Oh yeah, here's some more of those microtectites like the ones we see in Haiti. Shock quartz over there. This is really cool. The next slide. There's fish, and inside the fish fossils are the microtectite beads. So apparently the fish were swimming along, rained down microtectites, and they swallowed them. So they're inside the structure of the fossils. So this is telling you, this is when these fish are dying. You know, this is the actual event. So it's another amazing example of, you know, figuring out what happened right at that Cretaceous Tertiary boundary, Paleogene boundary. This is Gerda Keller. When I taught at Stanford, she was at Stanford too, and she's one of the big proponents. She's a paleontologist at Princeton, and she's one of the big opponents to the Walter Alvarez theory. She thinks that there was an asteroid collision, but the timing really doesn't match with what she thinks happened. So she argues about the dating and whether the asteroid caused it or something else. All right, we were going to look at the little video showing the impact of the crater. Oh, what's this? That's right. This tells you 65 million years ago, an asteroid 10 kilometers in diameter struck Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. There's what it looked like. The asteroid and its 100-kilometer diameter crater. Remember, just about 3 minutes ago, I said it was 200 kilometers. This is what you have to deal with, right? It might have killed the dinosaurs, or that killed the dinosaurs. Okay, let's turn back the clock. Geography was different back then. Here's Haiti, by the way. This is what it looked like 65 million years ago. Yucatan was under a shallow sea. Florida did not yet exist, to everyone's benefit. And most of central North America was in less than 175 meters elevation, and there was an inland sea. So 10-kilometer impactor velocity, blah, blah, blah. Arriving at 40,000 miles per hour, the asteroid had the energy of 3 billion. There we go. The question came up. 3 billion World War II atomic bombs. This is showing the wave height. These are in meters. So 80 meter, so 240 high foot waves, going up 30 feet up in Illinois and so forth. So close in, the tsunami waves reached about 100 meters in height, 300 feet. Along the Mexican coast, waves were maybe 150 feet high. Some geologists suggest that the crater, the tsunami reached Chicago, Montana, or Canada. From North Dakota, we saw the evidence of it, right? The simulation, however, predicts just 20 to 30 foot meter waves in proto-US. The reason is okay, here's what would happen if it came from different directions is one of the questions. So you might push bigger waves northward if it hit from the south. The tsunami was restricted to, this is important, 100-meter size because it's struck in shallow water. So if it had struck in deeper water, you would have had a larger tsunami. You could have had landslides during the tsunami, which caused additional seismic tsunamis. For now, suppose that the asteroid landed in deeper water a bit to the north in the Gulf of Mexico. So deeper water impact, and now you're seeing 240 meter high waves, 600 foot waves, 100 meter waves, 300 foot waves, and all right, and hitting over in Spain now. Okay, so now they're getting into the more poetic stuff. Anyway, that was just an example of some of the modeling that's been done of this event. And if you want to entertain yourself, when you go home, there's tons of videos on this. You know, they'll talk about what, a lot of it is kind of like, well, we think this happened to the atmosphere and the temperature got up to 400 degrees Fahrenheit and all that sort of stuff. And there's a lot of iffy stuff in there. And that's why I'm just presenting you what happened in terms of the rock record and not what might have happened. All right. So summary. What happened? Asteroid. This is end Cretaceous extinction. Evidence, iridium anomaly, shock quartz, tektites, metals, and then finding the crater. What died? Dinosaurs, lots of marine life, lots of plants. Okay, overview of mass extinctions. Where are we? We noted that there are a bunch of extinction events, 5 big ones. We concluded that one killed the dinosaurs. This one here was likely associated with an asteroid. What about the other ones? Were those all asteroids as well? So all extinctions are caused by...
Dave, could we pause a moment here? We're trying to get off of the video here.
What is happening?
That might be the video.
Oh, I bet it's the...
If you can probably kill that screen.
Yeah. No, that's that
That's
one.
the other one. There we go. For you, but not for us.
No.
Picture a world of giant.
Picture a world. Can your helper do it?
Pterosaurs.
No, they're working on it, but we're not
While beneath
showing the
waves,
audience at home
fierce
anymore.
predators called mosasaurs.
Oh.
Yeah, that must be your video that's continuing there, or else it went on to the next one.
I can't hear you.
Can you roll your video?
I can't. I don't know where it is.
Creatures like these
Oh, there it is.
Right there.
ruled the
Got
planet.
it, hold it.
All right.
And then
That's
There we go.
Mark.
Sorry about that.
Thanks, Mark. We heard you there.
Let's see, is that fix our Zoom problem?
No, not yet. Oh, there it is. Yep. But we're getting the camera, the classroom camera, rather than the actual. There we go. Okay. Good to go, Dave. Thanks, Mark
I need the mouse.
and Lucy.
Ah, we're down here. Well, we lost it all. Lord Almighty. Okay. So all extinctions are caused by meteor collisions. All we have to look is for iridium anomalies, right? And we can look at each one of these and we've solved the problem. So fun science, the nemesis argument. In the early 1980s, this is after Walter Alvarez had proposed the asteroid killing the dinosaurs. Scientists noticed that the extinctions on Earth seem to fall in cycles of extinction. Mass extinctions seem to occur every 27 million years. The long span of time caused them to turn to an astronomical event for an exploration. In 1984, Richard Muller of the University of California, Berkeley, suggested that a red dwarf star 1.5 light years away could be the cause of the mass extinctions. Nemesis is a theoretical dwarf star thought to be in comparison to our sun. There it is up there. The theory was postulated to explain a preserved cycle of mass extinctions in Earth's history. Scientists speculated that such a star could affect the orbit of objects in the far outer solar system, sending them on collision with the Earth. So they came up with this dwarf star hypothesis that every 27 million years we'd be bombarded by asteroids, and that's why we have all those extinction events in some sort of cycle. This is wrong, but it's very entertaining. Again, this was a big discussion in all the scientific, journals. So although some scientists find the nemesis theory plausible, most do not. The whole concept of the 27 million year cycle is probably not correct. And again, according to NASA, ask an astrobiologist, the sun is not part of the binary star system. So this theory went away, but it was kind of a cool. Sometimes it's fun, just like the idea about the rings around the Earth, telling you about this is the real nitty gritty of science that you guys don't hear about. So what caused the other mass extinctions? And Permian extinction, this is the big guy. Right? We're all there, right? Okay, Permian mass extinction. Permian mass extinction has been called the Great Dying since a staggering 96% of species died out. That 96%, if you look at different references, they go from 50%. So it's a soft number, but we'll just say it's 96%. All the life on Earth today is descended from the 4% that lived through that. The event turns out to have been complex as there are at least two separate phases of extinction over millions of years. Marine creatures were particularly badly affected, and insects suffered the only mass extinction in their history. So here's that. So here would be Permian rocks, here would be the Triassic rocks, and here's that boundary event. So goodbye trilobites. This is where we never see a trilobite again. Okay, there's the end of the trilobites up at the top there. Poor things, yeah. They're cute. All right, by the way, here's the Permian mass extinction has been nicknamed the Big Dying since expiring. 96% of the species died out. Here's another one that says 50%. Here's a 57%. So depending on what article you're reading, it tells you a different number. This is the Permo-Triassic. It says 60%. So it's some gigantic event. Everybody agrees it's the big extinction, but how many, the actual percent number is a little soft. Here's a little summary diagram. The end Permian extinction, there's again 2 extinction events here, separated by a few million years. When did it happen? In the Permian period? I'll talk about it. In Permian, here's what it went extinct. Again, we lost all the trilobites. We lost tabulate corals, different types of corals, rugose corals, goniatitic cephalopods, which are those, you know, squid-like things that lived in these shells, some types of brachiopods and crinoids and so forth. So a whole bunch of different fossil types were gone and never to reoccur afterwards. Does that answer your question? Well, that's the whole purpose. I have to get to it. Here's your answer. Okay, here's the iridium spike that we saw at the Cretaceous tertiary boundary. And here it is at the Permo-Triassic boundary. Problem solved. Let's go home, right? Oh, you guys. But wait a sec, compare the 2 plots. On left, the ratio is about 100 on that scale. Look at this, they had to condense the scale here. It went from 0.2 to 3. This is a ratio of about 3. This is not a real iridium spike. Maybe the end Permian extinction wasn't due to a meteor. So here's an article from 1998. Life on, let's read it. Life on Earth was almost destroyed. We investigated the possibility. They've looked up, they found a little bit of shock quartz. They saw some, let's see. Okay, they looked all over the place for it. The thin, the breccias are shock quartz, not very much. They found faint iridium anomalies at the boundary like we just looked at. But they're not as big as the ones at the Cretaceous tertiary boundary. Furthermore, the peak iridium values are much lower. The idea that the impact caused the extinction thus remains to be demonstrated convincingly. So they're saying, we don't really see evidence of an asteroid hitting. And this is, again, you're reading a real scientific paper. Isn't that amazing you're understanding all this? No, seriously. We went through it and now you're understanding from a paper in Geology magazine, which is one of the main journals. So now we have to talk about something new. This is the atom carbon, carbon-12, and there's different isotopes of carbon that can have different, and it has an extra neutron or 2 extra neutrons. You all know about carbon-14 because that's how we date things. It's a radioactive and it breaks down, and that's how we date the age of Roman togas and so on and so forth. Well, carbon-13 turns out to be really interesting because it doesn't break down. It's stable. But the concentration of carbon-13 varies with what type of material you're in. So if you're in a shell, a carbonate shell, it might have these values, whereas if you're in a land plant or in an algae, you'll have a different carbon isotopic signature. So carbon isotopes are a way for us to analyze, take samples of the rocks anywhere, and we can learn a little bit about the organic matter that created them. So this is what happened at the Permian-Triassic boundary. They're noting that the carbon isotopes, delta C13 carbonate, that means this is in shells, delta C13 carbonate in organic matter, organic versus shells. And they're saying right at the boundary, right there, things change. So they're saying whatever killed all those animals and plants and everything at the Permian-Triassic boundary, it somehow messed up the carbon cycle. That's all this says. Something weird happens here with life, but we don't really know what it is. So in this study, I think this is from in Science magazine, 2011, they think that change in carbon isotopes, a massive release of thermogenic carbon dioxide and or methane may have caused the catastrophic extinction. So these guys are arguing that the Permo-Triassic event was associated maybe with a volcanic eruption that spewed weird chemicals into the air and changed the carbon budget of the planet and killed everything. This study is on Mercury. Mercury, you're saying. They studied, right? They looked at Mercury. Where's the Mercury? Mercury over turtle, or here's Mercury, parts per billion. They took samples of rock all the way up and looked at the amount of mercury and saw this big spike of mercury right when the Permo-Triassic extinction happened. And they said, well, what could cause that? And they're saying maybe some sort of volcanic event. So they're saying the Permo-Triassic event was associated with maybe a gigantic volcanic eruption that spewed mercury in the air, and the mercury didn't kill the things. It's just an indicator, like a fingerprint of something volcanic happening.
Dave,
Yep.
could those have been the flood basalts, a period of flood basalting?
I think it is.
Flooding
Yeah.
basalt?
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay. Here's another scientific paper from 2004. Analysis of extinction levels in Austria and Italy reveal no evidence of an extraterrestrial impact. The end Permian crisis, this extinction, was a homegrown catastrophe. So this is written in the paper, which is this, whatever it is. Oh, in Geology magazine, again, one of the major geology journals. Here's evidence. These guys argued the whole oceans went anoxic. So instead of having that vibrant life that we see in the oceans today, if you went and studied the oceans, everything would be dead because there is no oxygen in it, based on this study. Okay, so they're saying that's what killed everything, is the oceans went anoxic. So, conclusion. Something weird happened at the end of the Permian and apparently was not a crater, not a meteor impact, right? Right? Extinction seems to have been caused a dramatic change in global climate, possibly associated with a massive volcanic event. So catastrophic methane release, flood basalt eruptions, climate change. This is what killed everything in the Permo-Triassic. Yep.
It didn't kill everything.
No, 96%.
But why did anything live through it?
Good question, but I don't know. All right.
And this ignores the iridium?
Excuse me?
This ignores the iridium?
Well, it said the iridium's, it's a little microscopic wiggle. It said it's not really significant. So I think the answer is we can go home, right? Yep. I'm building up to something here, people. Yeah, go ahead.
You stated that in the ocean, when without oxygen,
Yes.
there's oxygen in water.
You know, when I say it was without oxygen, it was not enough oxygen to support life. So it's more like a stagnant pond, like, you know, with the, you know, the black, smelly, anoxic pond that wouldn't support life. That's what they're talking about. Yep. I'm building period. This is going to be the, but go ahead.
Can you repeat the questions up there, Dave?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes, thanks.
I'm forgetting everything. How do we know that isn't there always oxygen in oceans? And the answer is anoxic oceans have minimal quantities. They're very low. There is oxygen in them, but it's very low quantities. Yes.
If those extinction events had not occurred, would you and I be standing here right
That's a question for others. I'm building here. I'm trying to tell the punchline. Wait, oh, there's somebody talking to me. Yes,
No, we can't go home.
very good. Yep.
So these are the three possibilities that you're setting.
No, these are not. These are the
We
three.
really never can go home if we keep messing up the climate, right?
We're going to get to that too. Okay, go ahead.
These are the three possibilities.
No, these are three. These are the three conclusions that have been argued in the previous slides.
Okay. And how would you have catastrophic methane release?
Possibly associated with flood basalts, or there might be some other mechanism.
That's the same.
They'd be associated, yeah.
And that would cause climate change.
Yeah. Everybody wants a piece of it, so. And I may be overgeneralizing it as well, but there we go. Bedout, a possible end Permian impact crater offshore of Northwest Australia. So these guys claim that they found the crater that killed everything at the end of the Permo-Triassic. So we just said one thing we know for sure: the Permo-Triassic was not associated with any sort of asteroid impact. By the way, he's a friend of mine, or a guy I know. He's at UCLA. I think this was one of my students at Stanford. I'm pretty sure it is. He's very famous now. Anyway, this is about the, I don't know how to pronounce, the Bedout High located. They think that this is the location, size, and age of this crater can account for the reported occurrences of impact debris in the Permo-Triassic boundary sediments worldwide. So they're arguing for impact of an asteroid associated with the Permo-Triassic. Here's another one: chunks of metal from the alien spaceship, no doubt, associated with the Permo-Triassic boundary in the Antarctic. So in one sample, the meteoric fragments, blah, 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 blah. We discuss the implications of this finding for a suggested global impact event at the Permo-Triassic boundary. So we just convinced ourselves that there's no evidence of any impact at the Permo-Triassic, and then these guys showed up in 2003, and the previous one was 2004. All right, so to sum up, what happened? End Permian extinction, volcanism, methane release, anoxia, maybe an asteroid as well. We have carbon isotopes, mercury contact, but some evidence of an impact as well, and just about everything dies out. All right.
But you don't have the iridium.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Don't ask me. I'm just reporting this stuff. All right, the end Ordovician event. Again, if I could go back and check, I think there is one of those guys discusses an iridium event. So it's not as marked certainly as the end Cretaceous. So, but I could give you more detail if had you asked that question before you knew me. All right, the end Ordovician event. That's this one here. All right, so Ordovician Silurian mass extinction, the third largest extinction in the Earth's history. The Ordovician Silurian mass extinction has two peaks. Possible causes of the event: climate change. During the Ordovician, most life was in the sea because land plants hadn't evolved yet, and such as trilobites, brachiopods, and graptolites, where they were drastically reduced in number. 85% of all sea life was wiped out, again, soft number, but a large amount. An ice age has been blamed for this extinction. A huge ice sheet in the southern hemisphere caused climate change and a fall in sea level and messed with the chemistry of the oceans, is the interpretation. So end Ordovician extinction. So time is going in that direction. What happens? There's two distinct extinctions. I guess these two speaks right there. And what became extinct? All of the major animal groups of the Ordovician survived, including trilobites, brachiopods, corals, etc., but each lost important members, and widespread families of trilobites disappeared and graptolites came close to total extinction. All right, so here's examples of what went extinct at the end of the Ordovician. So trilobites, brachiopods, and then graptolites on the bottom. And then here's our friend. So the end Ordovician would be here, and those are the trilobites that got extinct. Okay, and again, they're arguing that there is a great ice cap. Personally, I don't buy this at all because we've had ice ages in the Pleistocene and we didn't see an enormous extinction. So I don't really like this interpretation. But so they're arguing for this ice cap and a climate change argument. And Ordovician extinction. So this is from what year? I think 2012. And Ordovician extinction, proposed kill mechanisms, glacial induced cooling, global anoxia of the oceans. Eugenia is anoxia, plate tectonic movements, mass extinctions, glaciation, and so forth. So they're talking about mostly glaciation and then this anoxia of the oceans, where the oceans go anoxic. Another summary plot: what caused the Ordovician Silurian mass extinction? Global cooling and reduced sea levels. Again, I'm not really that impressed by those interpretations. Well, we figured that one out. Let's go home now. Iridium. The results show that a distinctive iridium anomaly is present at the boundary bed of the end Ordovician. The iridium concentrations range from blah, blah to blah, blah. And the geochemical signatures mentioned of us support the hypothesis that the extinction is likely related to extraterrestrial causes. So we just went through why saying it's associated with climate and oceanic anoxia. This guy comes through in 2012. Is it 2012? And says, no, it's another extraterrestrial event. So you're seeing that the science here really isn't settled, right? They're kind of, everybody's saying something different, it seems. But wait, these guys studied the iridium and they said, oh, it's just different. They came up with a different extraterrestrial cause. These patterns are probably related to the salinity. So he's explaining the iridium, but he says it's related to the salinity in the seawater. So he's coming up with some weird geochemical study. And he says it's not due to an asteroid impact. So they probably got in a fist fight as well at some geological meeting. And here's another study where they say the same thing. So a lot of these studies, they come up with different origins, and there's still argument going on about what the correct answer is. And here's just a summary of some of the different interpretations. Okay, so end Ordovician change, climate change, glaciation, sea level change, anoxia in the oceans, or maybe a bolide impact. Geochemical studies where they haven't provided evidence, marine organisms, no land plants yet. So we got two more extinctions to talk about. This is the end late Devonian. 3/4 of all species on Earth died in the late Devonian, though it may have been a series of extinctions, not just a single one. So there is some evidence of an impact event associated with, so everybody acknowledges that there may be an impact event associated with this late Devonian. Okay, yes? Okay, first of all, we don't use carbon-14 to date anything older than a few thousand years. So, okay, what's your name? Frank. As Frank was mentioning, oil doesn't really just come from, it can come from dinosaurs, but most of it comes from like marine algae and things like that. So there's a whole bunch of different types of oil. By the way, just to waste more time, which is what I can do, we can actually tell the age of the oil from the organic compounds in it. The oils in the dinosaur time have the flowering plants in it. So they can actually find out the chemistry of the flowering plants and identify that in the oil. And they say, oh, this oil actually came from this period because we associated this chemistry, this benzene ring or whatever, with an individual plant fossil, which is kind of cool. Yeah, basically coal are like swamps, and oil is like like fat. Basically, oil is the fat. If you heat, if you take a bunch of algae and you cook it in your oven, it'll turn into oil. And that's what a lot of the oil is in California. I have another class on that. All right. All right. All right. Late Devonian mass extinction. So they're arguing also that the oceans went anoxic in the late Devonian. And changes in sea level, asteroid impacts, climate change, and new kinds of plants messing around with the soil, last one a little questionable, have been blamed for these extinctions. So here's our end Devonian. So there's a whole bunch of Devonian extinctions, and here's our Devonian. So you can see there's different spikes here. So it's a very complex series of extinctions. 375 million years ago. And here's some of the creatures that went extinct, certain types of trilobites, certain types of brachiopods, other types of brachiopods. And here's our friend, the trilobites. The end Devonian guy would be up there. So we lost a lot of the trilobites in the end Devonian. Evidence for perturbation of the carbon cycle in the late Devonian. I have it shown in red here. Causations here for this negative event are correlated with either biota turnover with, no, neither, but maybe related to the Alamo Breccia event that led to the blah, 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 blah. Okay. These guys are arguing for another bolide event. And here's where it is. This is in southern Nevada. And there's this unit in southern Nevada called the Alamo Breccia. What happened is they, in the olden days, they were mapping this mountain here and they found this one layer and all the rocks are just like broken up rocks. And back in the day, before we knew about bolide impacts or anything, they said, oh, look, there's a big bunch of rocks that are all broken up. I'll call it the Alamo Breccia. And that's all they did. And they walked away. And then someone came back and they said, wow, that's right when an extinction occurred. Maybe this is evidence of a bolide impact. So they started studying it and they've concluded that this debris, so this is basically a cliff and here the rocks are normal layered rocks. And then you go to this part of the cliff and there's all these broken up rocks and so forth. And that's when they think the bolide hit. They also see the presence of shock quartz and an iridium anomaly. So this has all the hallmarks of the Cretaceous Paleogene event. And there's all sorts of details in here we don't have to go into. So they're seeing evidence of a bolide impact for this late Devonian meteor. It's a bolide, just some object, a ball-shaped object. Bolide. So summary of the different causes. They're seeing evidence of climate change. We talked about oceanic anoxia, but also this evidence of this bolide impact. So they think there might be evidence of the crater in Sweden, but they're not certain of that. So moving on, end Devonian, changes in sea level, asteroid impacts, climate change based on carbon isotopes, geochemistry, iridium anomaly, shock quartz grains, tektites, metals, and we lost a lot of trilobites and brachiopods there. And then our final extinction is the youngest one here, or the second one here, the Triassic-Jurassic one here. By the way, notice that these extinctions occur in changes in the geologic time units. That's because the geologic time units are based on the fossils. And if the fossils all disappear at the end of the Cretaceous, they start naming a new period, the Paleogene, because the fossils have changed. So the reason these lines are all parallel to the different geologic time periods is because the time periods are based on the fossils. This is a little off. This is the end of Ordovician and so on and so forth. Okay, end Triassic extinction. So they're arguing flood, basalt eruptions, climate change, impact events, what was likely killed, reptiles, whenever a synapsid is. During the final 18 million years of the Triassic period, there's 2 or 3 phases of extinction, and that caused the mass extinction event. Climate change, flood basalt eruptions. What a flood basalt eruption is an enormous area, thousands and thousands of square miles, is invaded by basaltic magma, like you'd see on Hawaii, that black rock, or on Iceland. Only it'll go into the continent and cover thousands and thousands of square miles. And the idea is that all this volcanism over thousands and thousands of square miles will change the atmospheric composition and affect life on the planet. So that's why these flood basalt eruptions are thought to be so significant. The problem with flood basalts is they're very difficult to date because they don't have minerals that are easily datable. Granitic rocks, like in the Sierra Nevada, have minerals that you can date just like that. They're just perfect. Basalts are very hard to date, and that's why these flood basalt eruptions are a little bit more iffy to define. Okay, many types of animals died out. Roughly half of all species alive at the time became extinct. Strangely, plants were not so badly affected. So that's the end Triassic. And what became extinct? Invertebrates. What caused the extinction? Let's just skip that. So Triassic, Jurassic mass extinctions, evidence of a bolide impact. Here's more evidence of a bolide impact. This is from 2003. Let's see what they're saying. Fullerenes, this type of organic molecule. The possible presence of this organic molecule along with the productivity collapse, rapid environmental change, suggests that a cometary or asteroidal impact may have occurred. Another problem they're talking about now is a bolide, like a meteor hitting, is a rock smacking the planet. What would happen if a comet hit the planet? Where you don't have a big rock, it's still a big impact, but it's basically like a big ice ball hitting. So there's some discussion about how different things might be with a cometary impact versus a bolide impact or a meteor impact. So summary, end Triassic, climate change, flood basalts, eruptions, asteroid impact have all been blamed. Volcanic activity on a massive scale introduced carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, changed the composition of the atmosphere, and a lot of animals died out. On that plot, we also show minor mass extinctions. So we have the big spikes, and then we have a lot of smaller spikes. We're not going to talk about those. This is a summary from National Geographic where they're looking at all of the major extinctions, the 5 big ones, or the 6 big ones. This is the one we're going to add. And so I'll just go through this. So this is officially from National Geographic. This is our favorite Cretaceous Paleogene extinction. Wiped out the dinosaurs along with 60 to 70% of all life on Earth. A widely accepted theory is the asteroid landed in the Yucatan Peninsula. The impact would have ejected an enormous amount of debris into the atmosphere, causing global temperatures to drop. The impact also may have caused fires, earthquakes, tsunamis, and acid rain. Okay, the Permo-Triassic extinction, this is the big guy. The deadliest extinction, volcanic activity in Siberia put a massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, produced some methane gas, large quantities of gas, blah, blah, blah. But also we said that there might be evidence of a bolide impact there. In fact, all of these have some evidence of a bolide impact. Ordovician Silurian extinction. Scientists theorize that there were 2 major phases. Abundant plant life removed carbon dioxide from the air, causing global cooling and glacial formation. This led to a drop in sea level. All right. Late Devonian, land plants develop. This is, I don't know. We'll just skip it. All right, Triassic, Jurassic. Anyway, so let's just go on. Anyway, that's our summary that we've come up with. So extraterrestrial origins, clearly there's support for an extraterrestrial origin for the death of the dinosaurs. However, in this class, there's been mention of asteroids, etc., for all 5 extinction events. But other factors are implicated as well: oceanic anoxia, glaciation, climate change, sea level changes, volcanism. The science is simply not settled, right? Now, here's your what's the thing in New Orleans where they give you something at the end? The tip, not the tip. What's that? Yeah, the gift you give someone at the end, like there's a word for it. This is the problem when we get old, we forget all of our vocabulary. I'll remember it in the shower like tomorrow. Okay. Coup de grace, not a coup de grace. Holocene extinction. That's what's going on right now. All right. Here's an artist imaging of humans killing dodos. All right. The Holocene extinction, otherwise referred to as the 6th mass extinction of the Anthropocene extinction, is an ongoing extinction event of species right now as a result of us. Okay, the extinction includes the included extinction spans numerous families of bacteria, fungal, plants, animals, mammals, birds, reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrates, with widespread degradation of highly biodiverse habitats such as coral reefs and rainforests, as well as other areas. The vast majority of these extinctions are thought to be undocumented. So the total amount of extinction that we're causing right now is very difficult to quantify. And the current rate of extinction is estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times greater than normal extinction rates. Causes of the current extinction include habitat encroachment. So we're living in places where animals and plants used to live. Hunting, death of the dodo. Climate change, warming, ocean acidification. Pollution. Genetic mutations, introduction of invasive species. These are all the things that we're doing right now. Here is habitat destruction. So transformation of a rainforest into agriculture. This is an interesting plot. This shows human population here and the number of extinctions. Now, there's a thing in statistics, correlation does not imply causation, but I think we can assume that that probably is correlated and causation as well. Here's another one. Here's where Homo sapiens arrive. Here's a tree coming in with the Homo sapiens, and here is the large mammal population of the continents. So you can see that every time the humans show up, we basically kill all the large animals. So this is contributing to the Holocene extinction that's occurring right now. So from 1500 to 1900s, they've documented 140 extinctions, including the dodo. Since 1900, they think that there's 477 extinctions, mammals, birds, amphibians, and fish. This is a really cool plot. Biomass of mammals. So we're mammals. If you took the mass, the weight of all the mammals on Earth as of 2018, blue is our livestock, chickens, cattle, goats. Red is our human weight. Elephants, lions, bears are that little green wedge. So before humans had all this livestock, none of that blue would have existed, right? And if we had a smaller population, that red wedge would be much smaller. So this is showing how we're dominating the volume of mammals on the planet. This is another plot, which is interesting. This is a really interesting idea. They've taken the biomass, anything that's organic on the planet, and they say, this is the volume. So they're saying most of the mass of organic matter on the planet is in plants, 450 gigatons of carbon. Archaea, which are some primitive life form, are 7 gigatons. Viruses are that little black one. Isn't that amazing? Viruses, 0.2 gigatons. Bacteria is 70 gigatons. protists, one-celled organism, fungi, and then animals is this little gray square. Isn't that interesting? How much, this is again, the volume of carbon on the planet. And then if you look at just the blow up of the animals, and we're really getting to this figure here, here's different types of animals, mollusks, nematodes, so forth. This big one is arthropods, fish, and then livestock, wild animals, and then humans. So this thing here is basically that piece right there. But it also shows how insignificant we are in terms of the total volume of mass, carbon mass on the planet right now. Summary of our class, and let's see what this says. This is it, Jenkins, indisputable proof that the ice ages caught these people completely off guard. All right. In this class, we've talked about how fossils might have impacted humans' early thoughts about nature and even God. We've talked about how scientists, mostly paleontologists and stratigraphers, have built a geologic timescale that can be used to study evolution and extinction. We've talked about major and minor extinction events and their possible origins. The most famous extinction event, the one that killed the dinosaurs, was associated with an asteroid collision with the Earth. But did all the extinction events have extraterrestrial origins? Clearly not, though there's still some excellent science being done researching these. And as a final note, the 6th great extinction, the one man is causing right now. And by the way, I'm gonna go to home. And I just wanted to show, this is my first slide. I know. Just wanted to prove them. All right, that's it.